I totally get it.
Okay, so coming to us from Texas, Dr. Kourtney Sims. Awesome to see you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you have a very holistic approach, which I'm very excited to delve into because I feel sometimes it's lacking in the current menopause conversation. And I wonder just off the top what you feel about the menopause conversation in the US. Is there a way for you to sort of gauge where the emphasis is?
I mean, I can only gauge kind of where the conversation was as I went through training versus where it is now. That's probably my best way to gauge it. And I would say that I feel like there is broader conversation. I feel like but I feel like honestly it's more from the patient facing consumer demand side. It's kind of like one of those things where patients are more educated now, and because patients are more educated, they over time have demanded more education, more conversation at the doctor's office, more conversation in the general community. So I think that's probably honestly why I feel like I see the biggest shift. I don't know if necessarily that shift came from the physician or provider community per se, just because of the small amount of training that most physicians get. It's only about 20%, right, of all physicians. That includes OBGYNs that have menopause specialized education, even during residency, right? So we're not talking about doctors that choose to go on to get a menopause certification. We're talking about just your basic average MD, your basic average provider. They don't get it. So it's kind of it's a challenge, and I think over time it's been a challenge for women to talk about the issue. I think it's been an issue in terms of workplace time and demands, in terms of when you're going through that transition and what that shows up like at work, and what things you might have to face at work while you're in the kind of the peak of your career. I mean, that period is really kind of the peak of whatever your chosen field is, so I just think that there is more conversation, but even in the midst of there being more conversation, there still is more conversation to be had. I still feel like a lot of women feel kind of a stigma around menopause and bringing it up. Some women have really good resources in their community. They have a good circle of friends, a circle of family that they can talk to, but not everybody has that, right? So if you don't have that, and you live in an area where you have one of those doctors or providers, right, that doesn't really know much about menopause, so they're not going to tell you anything about it, or they're just kind of tell you, well, what you're going through is normal. Because a lot of patients who say that, they're like, okay, like, I know it's not going to kill me, like I'm not going to die, but could you give me a little something, like, I mean, something to go on, and they don't even get that. So then they turn to the internet, right? They turn to communities online, they turn to social media, to really get that information that they were missing from those other sources.
How much did you learn about in medical school? How much did you learn about?
I mean, in medical school and residency, I would say, can you see like how close together my fingers are? Like 2%, 3%. And I feel like I had a really good training program. I went to a county program. It was very rigorous. I had a lot of time in clinic. But even with that, I would say that when you're going through residency, especially OBGYN residency, the main focus of your training is more so on the obstetrics as opposed to the gynecology, just because of the dynamics involved in delivering, right? And you're trying to make sure that you get enough exposure in that area. A lot of the assumption, at least when I was going through training, is in some of these other topics, you would get your experience once you're in clinic, right? Which sounds crazy that you're just going to figure it out, just out there on your own. Once you're already taking care of people, that's when you're supposed to figure out how I should counsel and what I should say and more about this topic. So I don't think that I got that much. And because of that, post training, I went and I did a certification with the North American Menopause Society, so I could kind of garner that education and know more about that phase of life, just because you don't get that level. The education that I got in my NAM certification was nowhere near the training, education that I got on the topic of menopause. And that's no, you know, I love my teachers, but there's only so much time in a day that they have to teach all of OBGYN. And that, unfortunately, a lot of times I feel like just falls to the bottom.
Okay. And what is it? Okay. So in the UK, which is a very loud conversation, I feel like I look at the world. So I feel like the UK takes up a lot of space, but because it's got this collective focus, it's like government, help us, give more money, train more doctors. Like it's a public health system. So it's always pointed at the government to do more. And I feel like for that reason in the US, things are more fragmented because you don't have a full, you don't really have a focus. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
That does make sense. I mean, it's an individual, your programs are individualized, right? Like there's the AAMC, which kind of governs a lot of training programs, and of course there's your boards, all of the boards of the different specialties, which also govern what a person has to be trained on. But in terms of hours, right, like it's not like a concentration of you have to have 16, 32, 48, 120 hours of menopause experience, right? And I don't, other than the conversation around hormone replacement, right? Who gets it, who doesn't? I would say that's the biggest topic that's really focused on in training. But in terms of the conversation about just in terms of the conversation about holistic women's health in general, you don't get a lot of that in training. So of course, when it comes to approaching a topic like menopause from a holistic perspective, all of that training you kind of have to seek out on your own if you're coming through the US and getting trained, unless you have some other type of background, like, midwifery or herbalism, or maybe you're a naturopath, or even DO, I think has a little bit more flexibility than what standard MD, NP, PA training is like. So yeah, if we had more of a national body, right? Like if North American Menopause Society kind of governed and set the requirements, okay, every medical school, every residency program has to have this baseline set of standards, then yes, I think you would be generating a whole different degree of provider. But that still would skip a generation. It takes 12 years to grow a physician. So,
right. You guys have to learn a lot, don't you? But also with the way the healthcare system is set up, there's no one's going to go to Congress and, implore Joe Biden to talk about menopause and lobby for menopause because that's the way the system's set up, right? Like it's just too.
I mean, if there was a drug, right, the primary way that things works over here is pharma. So if there was a new drug in development, then you would probably see a push around doing that. But even in the most recent position statement that NAMS made, in every position statement that I have read pretty much since I've been trained, there's always a push. We need more studies, we need more research money, we need more information. We know now, right, more than we used to know, but there's still a lot that we don't know. So we just need more money around research. And that's not a topic that's specific to just menopause. That's a topic and problem that's specific to women's health care, I think, in a lot of different areas.
In the UK as well, but I know this has been in the US because this traces back to the 50s, but there seems to be a resurgent emphasis on, there's one doctor in the UK particularly who wants to rebrand menopause as a female hormone deficiency syndrome. And then there's another very popular doctor on TikTok with like almost 2 million followers who I saw her make a video and said menopause is a disease. I spoke to a doctor here the other day that said, Anne-Marie, it's ovarian failure. And I know that this is, I see your face. I just want to know what you think of it. Look, like some people say, hey, I could see your face. Some people say, hey, people I respect say, no, I don't mind you calling it a deficiency because we need to make it something so that people pay attention. But I just wonder, what's your take on that? And is that you see that landing in the US again?
I mean, I think the problem is the connotation with the words, with the language, right? It menopause from my perspective, right? Because I'm integrative, because I'm holistic, I don't see menopause as a disease. I see it as a very natural transition. If you live long enough, your body is going to go through this transition. And then from an energetic perspective, I feel like a lot of premenopausal time is caught up in caring for a lot of other people, and you kind of have that biological drive with your hormones to care, to give, to produce, right? When you lose that biological drive, I honestly feel like that's your time for you. That is you spend the majority of your life in that period of time. That is the time where it's time for you to finally have some time to turn the focus within and focus in on what you want and make yourself the most important. So I don't see it as a disease. I don't think that I mean, in the way that obesity wasn't classified as a disease and it was a problem, and then once it got classified as a disease, then there could be medical treatments that were covered for it, that was beneficial. But you don't
Mhm.
need that with menopause. Menopause is already a diagnosis. I think that putting it in the disease category or the deficiency category makes it seem like something, like women are going through something that we did, or we lost, or we contributed to losing, when the fact of it is just the simple natural understanding of
Mhm.
what a woman's biology is. Don't
Mhm.
make it something that it's not. This is what we go through. Don't try to put it in a category that it's a problem. It's not a problem, it's a transition. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Well, what breaks my heart about it is that, fine, we're going through it now, and maybe you think that's expedient for you, but my niece who's about to get her period any day now, sure, she would love me talking about this. She's not going to, but am I going to tell her, well, you're going through this, but you're inevitably going to face a disease. The other end
Right.
of this is the disease situation, and it's inevitable. It's just going to happen, and there's nothing you can
There's
do
nothing
about
you
it.
can
So
do
enjoy
about
your
it.
time. Yeah, like it breaks my heart when
It's
I
just
think
not
of her.
inspiring. That's what I'm saying. It's not, it makes you think that you're going to hit, and that just goes into that whole connotation of aging.
Yeah.
I think that's why menopause, it's not just the fact that it's a women's issue, it's the fact that it is a central aging issue. It is something that has to deal with aging, and we
Yeah.
don't like to talk about aging, God forbid. But I, I just don't think it's a good idea to put out the connotation that, yep, you're going to hit this wall and you're just going to slide down the wall. And good luck to you. Good
Yeah.
luck. I hope you
Yeah.
can peel yourself up off the floor and carry on for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good, I don't, it's not supportive. That's what I
Yeah.
would say. I don't think that it's supportive of people going through this phase, through this transition. I don't think that is supportive.
Okay. And so we'll get into like symptoms, but I'm curious about your perception of the transition holistically, not really physically. Like, because you take a holistic view, you mentioned you spend all that time caring for other people, and then this is your time. But I think sometimes women have trouble with that, right? Like, I think that,
Yeah,
do you
big
think there's any,
trouble.
do you think that ever contributes to the stress of menopause and perhaps symptoms
Yes.
when because I know my friends, they haven't had 5 seconds. I've never had kids, but they've never had 5 seconds to think about themselves when you're bam, like alone. So yeah, I'm wondering what you think about that.
I mean, I think that if I have I'm an MD, right? But I also have a lot of I've gone and tried to get a lot of training, and start my educational experience, which I feel really will be lifelong, in herbal medicine as well. And in herbal tradition, there are distinct phases when it comes to a woman's maturation. And from an energetic perspective, when you're transitioning into this phase, right, the phase of menopause, perimenopause, when your hormones are going down. And if you look at most traditional cultures, in terms of rituals around this transition,
Mhm.
it's not something that is denigrated. It's more something that is celebrated as a transition to a different phase of life, right? So I do see, and I try to counsel my patients, if you come in as a premenopausal woman into your perimenopausal period, and your focus is completely external and you don't have time for yourself, like you said, you don't even have time to breathe or catch your breath, what I see clinically is that those women tend to struggle more in their transition because they don't have, as your body is getting used to not having estrogen around, as your internal thermostat is going haywire and learning how to adjust, that requires some time for your physical body, right? And your physical body is not separate from your energetic body, not separate from your spiritual body, right? So, of course, if you don't have that time, you don't make that time, you don't try to conceptualize it on a, what is this phase of life that I'm now entering and what things might I need to do differently in this phase versus what I was doing in my previous phase, I think it does make the transition harder. And that's not just from a mind body perspective, but also from a physical perspective. You need to be able to have the time to focus on your nutrition, have the time to focus on your recovery. Are you getting good rest? Are you getting good sleep? What is your sleep hygiene? Do you have a program for that? If you don't, right? If you barely had time to breathe going in, I mean, probably not. It's probably not, right? So those stresses that we face going into perimenopause, they have a big impact from a holistic perspective on how you weather the transition, right? Because if you it's a temporary period, although it can take several years, it's a lengthy period, it's a lengthy storm, but it is a storm that eventually kind of abates, right, for most women. So it really is a matter of, how am I weathering this? Do I have a whole rain hat and boots and jacket, or am I out here with just, frankly, underwear on and that's it? And yeah, if that's the case, you're going to get stormed on a lot, and it's going to be a lot more challenging.
I've heard the description that this is perhaps more difficult for us now, although it's difficult to say because I don't know that anyone's researched what menopause is like for us now versus what it was like for our mothers. It's all anecdotal, right? We can't know.
There's no evidence-based trial on that.
Right? No, like that would be great if we could go back in time.
We barely have studies that like try to quantify what symptoms are in different groups of women. So we definitely don't have studies that were like, okay, in comparison to the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Is there a randomized controlled trial comparing that to women's? No.
So we can just say it's worse. We can just say it's worse because we don't have to know.
But modern life, and I yes, I do think that we can say that the stresses of modern life are worse, right? Even if you just look at the rise in anxiety and depression. Right, just take mental health, right? That is risen exponentially. It's almost a curve that's like this. So those conditions, those issues are not separate from hormonal influence, right? And vice versa. So even if you just extrapolate that rise, then yeah, I would say that the challenges that women face going through the perimenopausal transition at this moment in time are pretty aggressive. Hopefully in the future, maybe they won't be so much, but I don't know. I have no crystal ball. I wish.
I've been hearing lately, like, because I speak to a lot of people in this space, one little trend I'm noticing, a CEO said it, a nurse practitioner said it, and someone else said it, is that a really pronounced symptoms in perimenopause are almost like a signal of underlying inflammation and problems. And that really scares me because then, in my mind, I'm like, oh God, I'm having a hot flash. Like I'm inflamed. And then I'm going to, as a longtime health journalist / hypochondriac, I'm convinced that I'm about to have a heart attack or whatever. But where do, I think there is something to that because that I think there's studies that the severity of hot flashes is tied to future incidents of cardiovascular disease. Where are you on that? That maybe if there's really bad symptoms, it's sort of something to look into and in your overall health, in your underlying.
Well, I kind of take it from the reverse, right? I take it as like if you come in, I can only use my clinical experience, right, as my guide. If you come in and you're around that period of life or around that transition, or your hormones reflect that, or you're having symptoms, I more so look at it prospectively, right? So I'm already looking at your blood pressure, your BMI, your sleep hygiene, your exercise habits, your nutrition, because you don't have to wait until you have aggressive symptoms to think if that's tied to underlying inflammation.
Mhm.
We already know that in the evidence, right? Like we already know if you have certain higher BMI that you have a higher incidence. Certain cultural groups have higher incidence and more severe incidence of symptoms. Women who have increased stressors have
Mhm.
increased incidence. So those are all things that you can identify.
Socioeconomic stresses, right? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Right. Well,
socioeconomic.
that's one of the stressors, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not it's not classified by like just taking care of parents or taking care of children or work stress. Stress in general increases incidence of symptoms. So you don't have to wait until there is you have a hot flash, right? To wonder, could this be linked to some underlying inflammation? I would honestly say you should act more prospectively. And when you enter, your mid 30s, early 40s, if you haven't been doing those checkups, right? You haven't been going like here, even here, if you have insurance, you don't have to usually pay a copay. Over there, yes, you can definitely go. But have your doctor run blood work, have them look, you can get your omega-3 levels looked at. You can get inflammation panels. You don't have to wonder if you have
Mhm.
underlying inflammation. Look at it. Be more you have to advocate sometimes for yourself to get these labs and to get this blood work and to have them do the evaluation other than them just doing the standard stuff, right? And telling you
Mhm.
you're fine, I'll see you next year.
Mhm.
But that would be my take on it. Is I don't see it as if you have a severe symptom you can automatically link it to you have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease or inflammation, because there are other factors that could be involved in why your symptoms are so severe.
Mhm. Okay. I heard someone the other day say that you should ask for your annual results and keep a spreadsheet.
Oh,
And I
I
just thought that
agree.
was amazing because then
Oh, I
you,
totally.
right?
Yes, I totally agree. Because you can see trends over time. Like in my system, I get blood work every year. I try to get blood work, even my annual exam. I'm not seeing you for anything else. I try to get a saddle labs every year, and then my system will automatically trend it over time. So that when I'm looking at your blood values, and I can compare, okay, are we going up or down on our
Mhm.
cholesterol, up or down, hemoglobin A1C, insulin levels, your CBC, your fasting glucose, your homocysteine, your C-reactive protein, your lipids. Like these are all things that you should be tracking over time. But you don't have
Mhm.
to leave it up to your doctor. Absolutely. And here in the US, most labs, the biggest companies are like LabCorp and Quest over here, and all of them usually offer individual portals to patients. So it's not even something that you really have to go through your doctor to get.
Mhm.
If you go and you had blood work done at a doctor, ask, okay, what lab do you use? So
Mhm.
the name. If it's LabCorp or Quest, you can go yourself online, set up an appointment, get your results, and then put that information in a sheet. But yeah, it's definitely a benefit to you as a patient to watch your trends over time, because sometimes, you know, a doctor, unfortunately, or a provider may interpret. Doctors are human and providers are human, right? So I have had patients who have been developing a trend over time that was missed, or they have may have somebody or a nurse or a staff or somebody at their doctor's office said everything is normal, right? And then when they get a copy of the actual results, they have a flag here and a flag here and a flag. They're like, what?
Mhm. They could
What
have
is
known.
this?
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So
Normal is, well, you know this because you're in both worlds, right? Like normal in the
yeah,
mainstream world is not normal in the integrative world, right?
no.
Someone could
Well,
be
I
feeling
describe
very
it
bad.
as, yeah, there's normal and there's optimum, right?
Right.
So, I would say the range of normal includes people who are suboptimal, right? They still need support, people who are optimum, and people who are trending towards disease, like they're on the road, they're walking the road towards disease. They just literally have not entered the door frame yet. When you're all the way outside of the parameters, then you've actually entered the door frame, right? Like you're sick, right? Okay, now I need, maybe a medication or a
Mhm.
procedure. But most people, when they go to the doctor, they don't want to know, like, if you
Yeah.
could let me know that I was on the road to the door that
Yeah.
was going to make me sick, could you let me know then?
Yeah.
That would be
Start walking.
much.
You could start
Right.
walking every night after dinner instead of just being, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of just chilling out on the couch.
Yeah. One less show. So hormone therapy gets a lot of the conversation, and of course it is a treatment, and but a lot of this is also driven by the pharmaceutical companies. Like, they're driving a lot of the discussion. That's correct, right? Like, a lot, it's coming at us in ways that we can't really perceive.
Well, I think I don't know over there. I know at least over here, right? When WHI came out, it was like a big, chill Arctic freeze when it came to hormone replacement therapy. There have been a couple, several new products that have been developed since then. But I would say, there's more, there actually is a big push here from the anti-aging community, some of the integrative community, in particular around the conversation for hormone replacement and what it might be able to do. There's been more subsequent research post WHI that kind of clarified some of those results. So, it kind of quelled a lot of that fear and clarified, is there actually, could there possibly actually be a place for HRT to be there and be protective and be preventative, and if so, when that is. So we do have better information now in that regard. So I feel like, honestly, some of that conversation around HRT, right, and the push and the consideration for HRT comes a lot from people who are trying to optimize aging. Right?
Yes.
They're trying to age well. They're trying
Yeah.
to age as gracefully as possible using all of their tools, right? And they see that as a tool that they could use. But from the FDA perspective here, they're very specific, right? On, okay, if you have hot flashes, you're trying to prevent bone loss. We're very specific on the indications for when you should consider it. And anti-aging is not one.
No one's recommending it, really, even for disease prevention officially.
I mean, other than bone loss.
Bone loss is the only one.
Indication over here is for bone loss, but other than that, yes, that's the major preventative category.
Yeah, and a lot of people are talking about it on social media as though it will prevent dementia, and there's some indications, but NAMS just came out and said no, don't take hormone therapy to prevent dementia. The only thing that there's a million other things that cause dementia. But I just organized a menopause shift summit, and we had some really forward-thinking integrative people on there, and over and over and over they were talking about hormone therapy, and I was like, okay, like, it was an anti-aging perspective. It was like optimizing your life. It was like, get on hormone therapy, basically. And because integrative, you guys are always ahead, I started thinking about that, like, I think that's an interesting angle, because it was seen by sort of the natural community as like a cop out, but now it's sort of by the biohacking, forward thinking people, right? It's now become a tool. Yes. Yeah. Where are you? Where are you on it?
I think, honestly, I always try to root everything down into evidence. And I think that the evidence supports looking at HRT from the perspective, if you're looking at it from a preventative perspective, it's around the timing, right? Number one, it's around the timing of when you do it, how long you do it, and who you are as a person and your individual risk factors. I think that is left out of the conversation a lot in these recommendations for HRT for, anti-aging. I feel like every person is different. Every person has a different family history. Every person has a different medical history. Every person has their own individual modifiable health risk factors. And I think it's maybe not necessarily the best practice to put HRT out there on the platter that everyone should eat from this platter, right? Irrespective. I think that you have to look at your own individual risks, talk to your doctor who knows your own history, your family history. And then once you have kind of tabulated the pros and the cons, and you've looked at the absolute risk and the benefits, then you can make a decision. But I'm kind of hesitant to put it out there that, HRT could be preventative and beneficial for every single person, because I do think that it depends on the timing in which you initiate the HRT, the dosage, that person's history, personal medical history, their current physical risk factors, both physiologic and physical body, right? In terms of BMI and weight and all those other factors. And I think that is not enough of the conversation. It's more so, yes, HRT. If you are, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, you should be on HRT. And I think some of those claims as well are a little hyper inflated. Like if you go back and you look at the studies, I don't think, just kind of like Nam said, like the studies still aren't really there. There may be a few little small things that may be suggestive, but in terms of something that you could really hang your hat on scientifically, I think that jury is still out. So, when people ask me questions like that, that's exactly how I'm like, the jury is still out. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. I'm saying that right now that is a possibility, but not a concrete, definite, there's not a concrete, definite study that I can say in all populations, across all populations, we see that benefit. We have some small studies in certain small populations, but I can't extrapolate that to, that's how, Caucasian women and Black women and Latinx women and interracial group. I can't extrapolate that. We need bigger data sets. And that goes back to our primary problem around having research dollars to kind of fund this information to really know, should we all be using HRT or not? Or should we be looking at stuff like, saffron and genistein and some of these other ingredients we might
Okay, I want to hear.
from.
You said saffron and genistein? I have not heard saffron. I've seen studies out of Iran. Even I saw a study out of Iran. Like they're doing.
Iran has got some great. Iran, I'm telling you, Iran has got some great herbal research. Like they're very diligent at doing their herbal research. That's what I would say.
Well,
especially
don't you find
from the herbal world? Yeah, you get a lot of good studies out of Iran.
Do you find that the herbal studies, at least me, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but for me, a lot of the herbal research comes from other parts of the world outside the US.
It does. It does. It does. But, even because other countries have, as their medical systems have evolved, they've tended to keep that portion of medicine within their modern medical system. And in the US, that was part of our original pharmacopoeia. And then it's kind of like, once we developed pharmacology and drugs, we were like, okay, you go over here in the closet, you herbs, you supplement, your lifestyle over here. And then, here's your prescription pad, and this is what we do. I think there's more. That tradition hasn't disappeared, of course, and it's still there, and there's still plenty of great groups here in the US who are trying to advance that research. But yes, definitely globally, you get a lot of good research across the globe, not just in the US.
So what about saffron? And I want to talk about the other one after, but what about saffron? How do you
I use it primarily like around mood and sleep. So like Phenology, that was part of, when we were doing that research and trying to come up with, okay, what are some ingredients that are evidence-based, right? That have really good research behind them that we could use to create a product that would be beneficial for hot flashes, that would be beneficial for mood, that would be beneficial for stress. And we wanted to ground it in research, right? So we wanted to ground it in something, not just what's out there, but something where there's actually some evidence based studies behind it. So saffron has been around, of course, forever, but the research has really emerged more in the past 15 years or so around its benefits around mood, stress, and sleep. And as anyone who is going through this transition knows, those particular areas are very much affected. So it tends to bring a lot of calming to the mood, some stability to the mood, helps you to combat stress, helps to ease into good sleep and maintain good sleep patterns. So that's why we brought that in. And then Cysteine is a soy isoflavone. The one that we use is soy free, though, actually, and nature identical. But it is an isoflavone that helps, is similar to red clover, fava beans, alfalfa. It's non GMO, and it kind of helps to mediate those vasomotor symptoms.
Mm,
So that combination together, right? You've got the hot flashes, the night sweats, mediator, and then you've got a mood, stress, sleep mediator, which covers a lot of the kind of, the top
mhm,
symptoms of what's going on during that period. But we also brought in things like CBD,
mm,
because we've looked at studies that show, a lot of women will indicate when we talk to them, it's not just the internal symptoms that they don't, like their skin changes, the skin changes a little bit, it gets a little drier, a little crapier. So CBD is really shown to kind of help to combat, along with one of the other ingredients in the skin cream, the Bell Even, helps to combat that cortisol release in the skin,
mhm.
which helps to give you more of that refreshed look, because you don't want to just, you want to transition well, right?
Yeah.
All of the work that I've kind of done with phenology is around, how to put together something that's holistic and offering in terms of conversation, in terms of support with diet and nutrition and lifestyle and movement and sleep, um, journaling, and then products that are holistic, natural focused with evidence behind them, because not everybody is going to want to be part of the HRT conversation. That's just reality. Even if you have people shouting it from the mountains that, you should take HRT, not every woman is going to want to do that. Women, and not every woman can do that, right? If you have a hormone positive, a lot of women are survivors from breast cancer or other hormone related sensitive cancers. That's not even part of the conversation for them. So there does need to be a bigger, broader conversation outside of just the realm of hormone replacement therapy in regards to what else do women need to support them through this transition from a whole lifestyle perspective, right? From a diet and nutrition perspective, from a mind body perspective, from a what can be found in nature perspective, as opposed to just a medication.
Okay. And Phenology is coming out. It's partnering with for a test for perimenopause. Is that true? So what's going? Because I've heard, oh, you can't test in perimenopause. That's you see that a lot. What's how does
Yes.
it work? Yeah.
So the testing that they're partnering with, it's we're putting it together and kind of referring to the entire program as like Phenology Pulse, and Phenology is partnering with NA, which is a at-home saliva testing device that you can use to measure your progesterone levels. Now, from our perspective, the purpose in measuring the progesterone level is not for you to just strictly measure your progesterone level and that to equal, you need hormone replacement or you need XYZ. It's more so in the bigger picture of having you participate in the app to get your cycle tracking, looking at your progesterone to give you some bigger insights on where you may be throughout the transition. Because the simple reality is, at least over here, not everybody has access. Some women go in and they're told by their provider that everything is normal. They don't know exactly where they are on the perimenopausal transition. They don't know what symptoms they should be anticipating or not anticipating. So we're not, advocating the tracking. I think a lot of the advice around salivary and urinary tracking for hormones is that you don't use that to drive dosage, which I agree with, right? You wouldn't necessarily use that to drive dosage, but that doesn't mean that you cannot use that insight to perhaps get, just like you use other fitness tracking data, right? Like if you wear an app tracker, right, and you're looking at your heart rate variability and your resting heart rate and your hours of sleep. We just talked about how we know those physiologic factors factor in to whether or not you have more aggressive symptoms. So this is more so about giving women that insight as to where they are in the stages of perimenopause, because there are quite a few, so that
Mhm.
they can better anticipate, okay, I might be entering a stage where I can expect to have more hot flashes and night sweats than the stage that I was previously in, and trying to harness that data on an individual N of one as
Mhm.
opposed to N of many.
Okay. I'm talking about progesterone. It's always intriguing to me because, sort of mainstream doctors, if you say progesterone, it's like, oh, you have to give progesterone if you have a uterus to offset estrogen. It's sort of just treated for that sole purpose. But the
Mhm.
integrative world is like very interested in progesterone and what progesterone as hormone therapy and what perhaps starting out with it during perimenopause and then adding estrogen. Like, where do you sit on that spectrum?
But still back on the individual per patient counseling side. Progesterone, I do agree that I think that, from the hormone replacement perspective, if you're taking estrogen, you have to take progesterone, right, to prevent the risk of endometrial cancer. That's the whole purpose of it. But that's not the only benefit of progesterone replacement, right? It can help to stabilize mood, it can help with sleep, it can help with, overall just feeling kind of elevated in terms of mood stability, helps with patience. So, progesterone can definitely have some benefits during
Right?
this period of time, right? But it also, conversely, no hormone replacements, are not innocuous, right, in terms of risk. So you and I don't know if I necessarily fall on the line of, you should just everybody progesterone should be in the water. And I think you have to look at your own individual set of risk factors to determine whether or not hormone replacement, whether it's progesterone only or combined estradiol or progesterone, or whether or not you're doing, you know, progesterone and estrogen and some additional holistic therapies as well. I think you have to individualize it per person.
Okay. And what mistakes do you see women making during perimenopause? Is there a common thread?
What I missed the
What
first part.
mistakes? Like what mistakes are we making in perimenopause that are making everything worse, do you think?
Continuing to work for everybody else.
Mm,
Right. I would say not taking enough time. I mean, that's it. That's the issue that I see across like premenopause, going into perimenopause, throughout postmenopause. You have to, as I said, this is a natural transition, but your body has to adjust. Just like you had to adjust in puberty, you were just kind of too young to be cognizant of the adjustments that you were going through. But I mean, if you were to ask anybody who was living with you at the time, they could tell you, yes, you were adjusting. There was a period there where some days you were not so nice. It's the
mhm,
same thing, but in reverse. But the only problem is when we were children, we had school and maybe chores, and like that's it. Like that's it on our list of responsibilities. But now when you're having to go through that transition, you have work, you have home, you've got friends, you've got family, pets, maybe, you have all of these other responsibilities that your mind is focused on taking care of and making sure they're maintained. And that leaves less time for you to take time to do self reflection, for you to do journaling, for you to have an extensive self care regime, right? And
mm,
that's really kind of what you need. So I say the thing, if I had to say one thing that women need to account for in this period of time is time. They need to account for time. They need to give themselves more time and not even time to do something. Sometimes you just need time just to be, just
okay.
to exist in the world, not do anything for anyone else, not think about what you need to do for anyone else or what you're going to do next, but literally just exist. Um, there's not, and I don't see my patients um, doing that, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I would say that we
Okay.
should do.
Time. Because it is a spiritual transition too. It's a soul transition. It's not
It
just
is.
about hot flashes and hormones.
Mm-mm. No,
It's
it's
about-
an energetic. I mean, like I said, your energetic body is wrapped within your physical body. That's my yoga
mm,
teacher training
mm,
coming out. But
mm.
these things they do go together, right? They go
Yeah.
together, and you have to, if you haven't acknowledged that at an earlier point in your life, right? I find that my women who have a stronger mind body connection going into perimenopause, they have a stronger sense of self-awareness. They've been able to already kind of master that ability to say no. I
Mhm.
find that they tend to have an easier ride through the perimenopausal transition, because they've already created the space in which they need to take that time to self-reflect, to adjust, to, they've already created the time around meal planning, and they've already created the time to be able to delve into their nutrition. So when that period comes, they've already created the space. They don't have to go and ask for permission for the space. They don't have to make it okay in their minds that they're taking more time to themselves. They've already created it, right? So it tends to be easier for them to weather those storms.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of women who will be listening will be thinking, I wish she was my doctor. What I'm thinking.
Hey, I always tell people I'm licensed in Texas and Virginia, but I consult everywhere. Okay. You just need to have a local physician, because you always have to, you need that local provider on tap. But and I'm working on books and courses and stuff so that people, because not everybody, some people, and different people are different too, right? Like different women have different demands, and sometimes you just need content that you can consume. Like I said, not everybody has that trusted circle. Not everybody has access to a trusted provider. So sometimes, women just need better guides, right? That they can kind of self-direct themselves to. I always jokingly used to say it would be so good. Like, how you get all this, you get more education around when you're an adolescent and, young women around STDs and, birth control and not getting pregnant. You get all that information, right? And then if you want kids, then you get information about fertility and how to get pregnant and all that stuff, right? And then after that, it's like nothing. It's crickets. You get nothing. It's the black hole of existence. So I think it would be good, right? Like, how AARP, this like retirement organization over here, when you get to a certain age, mid-40s, sometimes early 40s, they start sending you like little things like, hey, just letting you know, this is the phase of life you're about to enter. Yeah. We need that. Women need that. We need like a mailer, when you turn 30, you should get every woman, you should get like a mailer, your own language, your own culture, your country's cultural traditions. This is the phase that you were entering. Think about, these are the things you should think about. You should get one at 30, you should get one mid-30s. Then 40s, and then it would just be part of the conversation. It would just be part of like, yeah, I got my mailer, I got my little list of things that I need to start adding to my grocery cart. They told me I need to be focusing on eating colors. They told me maybe I should do a little yoga, and they said this thing about sleep hygiene. I need to work on that. If you knew that ahead of time, you'd be so well prepared.
You didn't burn through your 30s and then hit the 40s like in a sort of disarray with
slide down the wall.
Slide down the wall. I love it. I'm going to think of that next time I feel like that. Thank you so much. It was just absolutely wonderful talking to you. And you're the Chief Medical Officer of Phenology, so it's like, people can see you through that.
Correct. Absolutely. Phenology.com.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Bye.